Hey guys, welcome to week number 5 of our Freedom series, and this week we have Jessica Kennell with us. You all know Jess, but Jess, tell us a little bit about you, something that we might not know or something we may know.
Okay. Well, like Nick said, I'm Jessica Kennell, and I'm the Family Life Worship Pastor, and I've worked here for 5 years already,
Wow.
which is awesome. So all of you were like in second grade when I started working here. Something that you might not know about me is that I love to play board games.
And you're competitive,
I'm very competitive.
and your husband's very competitive.
He is. He just beat me at a board game twice last night, which has never happened before, so.
Nice. So I've actually played some like sports and stuff with Jessica, and you see her competitive side come out, but you also see how smart she is whenever you're playing sports against Jessica. It's really exciting and scary. So this week we're kind of shifting gears away from like what not to do and into this idea that the Spirit does something in our lives. So it's not just the Spirit comes to tell us what not to do or to help us not do bad things, but really the Spirit is there to give good gifts into our life and what Paul calls fruit in our lives. So the idea of fruit is that when you plant a tree, whatever tree you plant, something grows out of those. And so he's saying there's the fruit of the Spirit. So when you plant the Spirit in our lives, the certain things come out of it. Let's start there. Tell us, in your words and in your experiences, what is planting the Spirit? And that's kind of a spiritual term,
Right.
but what is seeking after God's Spirit and seeking after God in our lives and having more of Him in our lives? What does that look like?
Well, since we've been talking about the law, I would like to say that I am a rule follower. So, like, even before I was a Christian, when I gave my life to Jesus in high school, I wanted to follow the rules, and it gave me a lot of anxiety not to follow the rules. So, where I really felt like planting the seeds of the Spirit in my life have helped me is that following God isn't something that gives me anxiety, where I feel like I'm not measuring up and I always have to do more. But through understanding the work of the Spirit in my life, I realized that God gives good gifts in order for us to be able to live lives that glorify Him more. So God fills us with His love for a purpose. It's not like we have to be loving. It's like He gives us love so that our lives can be better and the way that we live with Him can be just a cooler experience.
Right. So how do you, in your life, how do you invest in that? Like, what do you do to increase that Spirit in your life? You know, increase that connection with what God's doing in your life and that purpose of God in your life.
Yeah. Well, one of the ways that I'm wired is that I love to worship. So music and singing and worshiping God is a big way where I connect with Him, and I actually get to listen to Him a lot when I'm worshiping. Like, He speaks to me through that. And I also am wired as a people person, so I learn a lot about God through the way that He has created other people. Like, by having people in my life that are better at certain fruits of the Spirit, that are more peaceful than me or have more self-control, I actually learn about the way that God gifts those things, because I'm like, wow, God has gifted you to be more self-controlled than me. Teach me how to do that.
So he lists off 9 different things. I usually get 7 out of the 9 correct, so you can help me remember the other 2. There's love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, gentleness, self-control,
Goodness and faithfulness.
Faithfulness, there it is. See?
I can sing it to you.
Oh, please do.
They're not in order when I sing it, but
Okay.
it goes patience, love, and gentleness, kindness, joy, and faithfulness, goodness, peace, and self-control. I wanna grow, fruit of the Spirit.
Nice.
Yes.
So she'll teach us that at some point, I'm sure.
Yes.
And so you have these 9 things that Paul's saying, you know, there's nothing against, like, if you have these in your life, you're not going to sin because of these things anyway.
Right.
He said there's no law against any of these. in your life, like which one of those, like if you had to pinpoint one,
Uh-huh.
would you say is one that God's gifted you with, that you feel the most, like in certain points in your life, you're like, oh, I see that thread through my life again? Is there one in particular?
I've been thinking about this a lot recently, and I think one of the things that I'm gifted with is gentleness, which I think just comes from me being a people person, because I want everyone to feel like they have value and that their opinions matter and that who they are is good enough. And so I'm very gentle in the way that I interact with people. And even when conflict arises, I have learned that instead of avoiding it, meaning that I was being gentle, that there are ways that you can approach, an issue in a gentle manner that actually leaves, number one, the conflict resolved, and number two, both parties in the conflict feeling like they were respected. So I just love people, and I want everyone to have the opportunity to thrive. And so I think the way that I do that is by gentleness.
Awesome. Now let's flip that a little bit.
Yeah.
What do you say? There's one. Like, there's one that you're like, I don't see God working in me as much in that way as I would want. Putting you on the spot.
Yeah. I think sometimes what I lack is peace. I can immediately jump to like a place of anxiety when things don't go my way, or when I feel like, like I've said, I'm a people person. When I feel like there is someone that is displeased with me or dissatisfied, or there's a conflict, all of a sudden I get knots in my heart or butterflies in my stomach, like I've got to go fix it now. I need to talk to them about it now. And so I've learned that about myself. And so now, instead of reacting out of a place of anxiety, I'm learning more about going to God first, taking that period of time to breathe, to seek wise counsel, whatever I need to do to get into a place of peace before I just go and try to undo whatever has been done. And again, I think it matches what Paul says about the anxiety of living up to every piece of the law versus the freedom of the life God has called us to and equipped us for through the gifts of the Spirit that he gives. So I'm learning a lot about peace.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
That's a tough one.
Yeah.
Looking at these 9 things, why do you think they're so important? Like, what do you think about these specific 9 things that Paul's saying, live out these 9 things, strive for these 9 things, when the Spirit of God is in your life, these are going to be the fruit. What about those things do you think is so important?
Well, number one, I think they're so important because he's telling us them because they are the image of God. If we have these 9 things in our life, then we bear God's fruit. We are representing his full image. But I also think they're so important because they're kind of countercultural. If you think about even like the hallways of the schools that everyone is in, like having kindness isn't always like the thing that happens. Gossip can be more prevalent than kindness. And so they seem like simple concepts, but I think Paul is saying like these things of the Spirit are actually a big deal. Even self-control,
Right.
that's a big deal. And so he's just reminding people, like, if you have these things in your life, like, you will bear the image of God and you will actually be like him no matter what culture you're living in.
That's really good. So if a student says, hey, I struggle with peace, or hey, I struggle with kindness, or I struggle with self-control, whatever, any one of the 9 that they find themselves struggling with, what's next? Like, how do they grow into that area? Like, where do they go from there?
Yeah. Well, I think the number one thing is that you can't necessarily expect yourself to go from 0 to 100, to go from really struggling with someone to being perfect at it, right? None of us will ever be perfect at these things. But I think it's creating small steps that propel you towards your goal when you notice that. So the number one thing I think you can do is get people in your life that will either, you can tell them like, hey, this is something I'm struggling in. I want you to kind of check in with me. So those people checking in, then get people in your life that you think have that gift. Like, you're struggling with peace, get someone who seems like they have peace in different situations and ask them, like, what do you do? And then I think it's implementing like small things. So maybe you're struggling at self-control, like when you get home, you feel like you're spending all your time on video games and eating Doritos, okay? So you're like, I'm trying to get more self-controlled, maybe add reading in there or whatever. Don't necessarily try to flip the switch all at once, but maybe create a structure where you can have more limited time and then, 30 minutes of this, 30 minutes of that, but just small incremental goals. It's sort of like a New Year's resolution. If you're trying to grow in something, it has to be a goal that can last, I guess.
It's really good. So kind of this idea of the Spirit of God in our life is this, he helps us not sin. He brings these good things. And then this fruit comes out. And the thing about fruit is fruit begets fruit. So like when you plant fruit, as you get more seeds to plant more. And so like you're saying, it's small things that can lead to more. But it's also this idea that God's plan for our life is truly to flourish spiritually. Like he gives us these things because he wants us to continue to grow. What's been like the biggest thing in your life that you said, I did this, or I had this encounter with God and it led to significant spiritual growth, or it changed kind of a trajectory for me?
That's a really good question. Let me think. I think there's two things that have been really impactful to me. The first thing was I, along with 3 other girls, formed an accountability group together. So we met once every week all the way through our college experience and just checked in with each other, like, how's your life going? What is God asking you to do? Where are the areas that you're growing? So being in that community of people that were all oriented to grow together was a really big blessing to me and really gave me a connection to God in a way I hadn't experienced before. And the second thing is probably when I got really intentional about the way that I was studying the Bible. Just reading God's word and digging into the passages that are hard, not the stuff that, not saying that reading any part of the Bible is like perfectly easy, but the parts of the Bible that I would have been before, like, that's more for like the scholarly pastoral types, and just realizing that God's whole story is open for me. And while I might not understand it, if I, again, seek out someone who maybe can help me understand it, it just opened tons of doors to me in learning about who God is.
Yeah. And so the thing about like talking about the Bible is these things that Paul lists here, they're prevalent throughout a bunch of other places. Like he doesn't just mention them once and they, go away.
Right.
It's kind of, they're some of the through lines when you look at the Christian life. And so really studying those other areas like you were talking about, like it really helps us get a full picture.
Right.
So one place is that, God's not giving you a spirit of fear, but of power, love, and self-control. There's another verse talking about self-control. So in these places of really studying the Bible, we can also factor in these small steps and help us grow in these areas. Anything else you want to tell our students before, something that you wish somebody would have told you when you were a middle schooler?
I think that the idea, since we're talking about God's word, of memorizing God's word, or as they call it, hiding it in your heart, can really impact the way that we live our lives for God. Like, when you're in a moment where you feel like you can't withstand a pressure, or you want to make a decision that you're just unsure about, those scriptures will come back to you, and it's like God's voice speaking to you in that moment. And so even memorizing this verse about the fruit of the Spirit is just empowering in all kinds of situations to know, like, "Oh, this is a really hard situation, but I know that God is with me, and that means that I have love, or I have patience, or, I have kindness, So you kind of realize that God is empowering you even in the most difficult situations.
Awesome. Jessica Kennell, we all know her, we all love her. Thanks so much for
And
being
I
here.
love all of you.
Thanks.